Okay, fourth graders, so as you've been working with decimals, I hope that you're really beginning to realize how great it is to be able to convert to different forms, to go from decimal to fraction, to go from tenths to hundredths. That's going to end up being an amazing thing for us as we move forward. So 7/10, how would I write that as a decimal? I would write it like that, right? And if you're ever wondering, always check and make sure. 7/10. If it lands in the tenths column, I'm going to call it tenths. All right. So now let's start talking about making equivalent fractions. 7/10 is the same as how many hundredths? And you'll know I have to multiply by 10 times 10 gets me the 100. So I have to give you 10 times as many if it's going to be an equal amount. 7/10 is the same as 7 hundredths. You're pretty used to that. Let's see what that looks like with decimals. 7/10 is the same as 70 hundredths. How would I write that? Let's try it. 70 hundredths. So 7/10 is the same as 70 hundredths, just like the two fractions are the same. So you want to train yourself to be able to see that, because that is key. If I can think about 7/10 as 7/10 or 70 hundredths and kind of be flexible to go back and forth because it's the same amount and understand them in the both forms, we will be way ahead of the game. And you'll be able to confidently do whatever you're asked to do with decimal amounts. Well, let's talk about comparing decimal amounts. If you see this decimal, and that's our where we're going to put our comparison or symbol. If you see that comparison, and this is called a comparison statement because they're comparing two amounts, right? So I would read this, and sometimes putting the decimal, the place value place is super helpful. 3/10. What's bigger, having 3/10 or 8/10? Well, 3 dimes or 8 dimes? I know it's going to be more to have 8/10 or 8 dimes if you want to be thinking about money, or 8/10 of a mile. I say I almost have all 10/10 of the mile. So I know I have more than if I only had 3/10 of the mile, if that's what we were talking about instead of money. It doesn't really matter. Okay, let's try this one. What's greater, having 35 hundredths or 19 hundredths? Okay, pretty obvious, right? 35 pennies or hundredths of something, we're not halfway, right? But this is also not halfway. 19 hundredths is also not halfway. But what's more, having 35 hundredths or 19 hundredths? Of course, having since the units match, we're talking hundredths and hundredths, we can almost just use our good number sense. 35 hundredths is more than 19 hundredths. Now, when we start to mix units, try to be mixing hundredths and tenths, it gets a little bit more tricky, but you can handle this. So read that decimal amount, and then let's go ahead and compare it to this decimal amount here. Well, first of all, let's read it. 9 hundredths. Okay, 9 hundredths. 5/10. What's bigger, having 9 hundredths or 5/10? If you didn't know anything about decimals, you would think 9 hundredths sounds like a lot, right? But you know about fractional amounts. 9 hundredths or 5/10. That would be 9 pennies, kind of, right? Or 5 dimes. Of course, 5 dimes would be more, but so often so many times I see students do that. And you know why? I think they're just saying the 9 and the 5 and maybe getting mixed up. But they wouldn't get mixed up if they made sure the units matched. If this is in hundredths, I can easily write 5/10 in hundredths form. That's the same exact amount. Now, if it wasn't already clear to me, it's really going to be clear to me now. What's more, having 9 hundredths or 50 hundredths? Obviously 50 hundredths. So don't get fooled. Take that extra 1.5 seconds to convert it to hundredths if your other number is in hundredths. And that will make a big, big difference to you. Let's try another one. What's more? 3 hundredths or 6/10? Which would be more? Well, I see hundredths and tenths first of all, so I'm going to quickly just say 6/10 is the same as 60 hundredths. So I'm just going to do that. Then it's just so easy, right? 60 hundredths is more than 3 hundredths. Okay, let me see if I can find one that's challenging for you. How about this one? Which amount is greater? 4/10 or 12 hundredths? Did you make this 40 hundredths? If you did, boy, is that 40 hundredths or 12 hundredths? Definitely 40 hundredths is more. Soon you'll be able to convert in your head. You'll just automatically do it. But as we're learning, go ahead and write it down. How about this one? Which amount is larger? So we have a ones, tenths, and hundredths. And so I made sure I had a ones here. Ones, tenths, and hundredths. And I see that I don't really need to make the match because this is so obvious. But if I wanted to, I could put a 0 there to fill in the ones place to see, so I can compare there's 1/10, 1 whole, or is it no holes? 0/10 or 9/10, 3 hundredths or 9 hundredths. And I can see that 1 whole and even just 3 hundredths is going to be more than having no holes, even if it's 99 hundredths. It's not a whole. So you can't glance at them. You have to analyze them, and then you'll be perfectly fine. Okay? And that is going to be how we're going to be comparing decimal amounts. Make the units match, reason through it, take your time, and you'll get them correct. I'm